Welcome into the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. It's week 8. We're talking trades. I'm Alfredo Brown, joined as always. I've got Dave Kluge here with me, and we're going to take a look at some trades that we think fantasy managers should be making here prior to week 8. We've got 6 players for you to buy, 2 players for you to sell. So you want to pay attention. Maybe these players are going to be available in your leagues, or it's a player in your roster that you need to get rid of ASAP. Dave, why don't you start us off here? Because I think each of us kind of has like a theme for these trades. It feels like yours are very much going into the brand of buying low, and mine, I know I'm going for big swings. I'm going for the absolute biggest swings possible.
And I think going for Zay Flowers, the guy that I want to talk about, is a pretty big swing, but I think that people
Okay.
don't look at him like that right now. I mean, we got to remember this guy was like, we were talking about the year 3 breakout. Like, this guy had finally ascended into wide receiver 1 territory to start the year, and then Lamar Jackson has been hurt ever since. And as Lamar Jackson hasn't been in the games, his Zay Flowers production has fallen off. I'm a simple man. Last week when we did this, I was talking about all these guys, AJ Brown and Stefon Diggs and Alvin Kamara, these guys that are like due for
It's
touchdown
been a long
regression.
time since last week.
Right. But I'm still looking for guys who have production and aren't scoring touchdowns. And that's exactly what Zay Flowers is doing right now. 46 targets, 1 touchdown. The only players with more targets and fewer touchdowns are Jerry Jeudy and Justin Jefferson. And I don't know about you, Alfredo. I have a lot more faith in the Baltimore offense to score touchdowns than I do in the Cleveland Browns or the Minnesota
Yeah.
Vikings. So we're looking right now. All the things that we were talking about early in the year are still holding true. Zay Flowers is pulling the career best target share, 29%. That is 8th best in the league right now. This guy is operating as a true wide receiver 1 this year, and the production has been down without Lamar Jackson, but that should rebound whether it's this week or whether he comes back a couple of weeks from now. You're buying him for that to be that late season guy that could be a wide receiver 1 for you. So when I'm looking at Zay Flowers, comparing him to my rest of season rankings with some other guys, I would give up Brian Thomas Jr., Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison Jr. And then if we start looking at some of the running backs, Ken Walker, Zach Charbonnet, some of these Seattle guys that are splitting touches, those are all guys that I'd be more than happy to move if I can get Zay Flowers in return.
Yeah, I'm excited just for the Ravens offense in general. Like, I think
Right.
Zay Flowers, this is a good pick here that actually leads right into the guy that I want to talk about, who is also a Ravens player. And I think there's a little less reason to be excited about him right now because of how things have gone for the season. But Derrick Henry is the guy that I want to talk about, who I'm willing to trade for. Like I said, big swings here. One of the things I talked about recently on the Pretend GM podcast was I had Faraz Siddiqui of Upper Hand Fantasy come on, and he specifically talked to me about one of his favorite things to look at midseason when looking for trades, and it's expected fantasy points. And that's just an easy way to look at, like what the weighted opportunities are, what the expectation was, scoring up, like all kinds of things, and like what the actual output is. So, right, like you can do the basic, here's what it should have been, here's what it was, this is what it could be, right? And you could try to make that formula in your head. It's not always perfect, but Derrick Henry right now, number 2 running back in terms of expected fantasy points per game. Number 1's actually Alvin Kamara, who, I mean, sure, at this point, might as well go trade for him too. Like, I'm not excited about it,
We
but
talked about him
uh,
last week, but yeah, just copy paste everything I
it's
said last week. Like, still trying to trade for Alvin Kamara.
yeah, these are players that are big swings, and I think that when you get to this point in the season, this is what you need to do. And if you're like 6-1 and you have talent to spare, take the big swing, see what you can get with Derrick Henry. If you are 3-4, 4-3, take the big swing so you can make the playoffs. If you are 1-6, like I'm just gonna keep going, take the big swing. One of the things that I loved seeing on here was obviously we get Lamar Jackson back, and the Ravens offense is very different. Hayden Winks over Underdog Fantasy posted this earlier today. Ravens are back to a 28.25 team total this week in terms of that's like for points and betting for those of you that are unfamiliar with it. The Derrick Henry Ravens career splits by result. When it is 20 or fewer team points, he averages 10.8 half PPR points. When it's 21 or more, we are looking at 20 half PPR points. So when we're looking at a team like the Ravens, if we're just going by data alone in just this simple week, it's a good reflection of what we could see from the Ravens offense. Just simply having Lamar Jackson back, an MVP candidate back at quarterback. The Ravens get Miami in 2 weeks in week 9. 2 really good juicy matchups against Cincy in weeks 13 and 15. The schedule isn't the schedule isn't kind all the way, but it's a pretty decent schedule for Derrick Henry. He's at a running back 2 price point right now, and that's sort of the thing that I'm looking at. Honestly, given his role, given the offense, I kind of lean towards worst case scenario, him being a running back 2, and you're just kind of paying for that price. If everything shakes out correctly and the Ravens offense just gets it together, we're looking at running back one upside. Dave, I know you've had your ups and downs with Derrick Henry, and I'm curious, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I am definitely looking at him as more of like a high end RB2 right now, just because that is the production that he's been providing so far this year. But like you said, like once Lamar Jackson comes back, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, how like this new way that offenses are attacking this too high shell coverage is by having a very good running back and a mobile quarterback, and not necessarily a read option, but just like the threat of having a rushing quarterback opens up lanes for these guys. And over the last few weeks, we just haven't seen defenses playing Baltimore that way. They've just been loading up the box on Derrick Henry because there is
Right.
no threat of a rushing
They're
game. It's
averaging
been
10
really tough
points
for
per
him.
game without Lamar. Like, it's just
It's
bad.
it's
No one's good in this offense.
it's been bad, and yeah, like, you can look at it, like, his loaded box rate has been, like, 50, 60, 70% almost every single week
Mhm.
without Lamar Jackson, so once Lamar's out there, we know that that is going to not only have the threat of a rushing quarterback, but also the threat of a deep ball and the explosive plays, and then we get Rashad Bateman involved, and we get Zay Flowers involved downfield, and then it opens up even more rushing lanes, so this is one of those things, like, we could talk on and on about, like, how impactful Lamar Jackson is to this offense, but, I think Lamar Jackson missing a handful of games and the Baltimore Ravens looking like they couldn't even cut it out in the XFL. I think that's all the argument you need for Lamar Jackson to be like the MVP frontrunner right now, that they're going to come back. They're going to hang 30 points again this week. Derrick Henry is going to be firing. Zay Flowers is going to be firing. Rashad Bateman's going to be back. I mean, all of these things happen because of Lamar Jackson. So I think a lot of people probably realize that, but there's also a lot of people that just look at the raw output and say, Derrick Henry's not performing. Zay Flowers isn't performing. This is frustrating. I want them on my team, but you just got to be patient. Everything's going to be fine once Lamar is back.
You know who the number one tight end is in net expected fantasy points versus actual fantasy points?
I don't. I'm guessing Mark
Mark
Andrews.
Andrews. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mark Andrews. This whole Ravens team, like everything is set for a bounce back, which by the
Mhm.
way, not even close to being true, but I still remember when Tua Tagovailoa was out for the Dolphins and the Dolphins went to absolute shambles and we're like, "You see? This guy could be an MVP candidate." I know it's not the same. So like don't get angry in the comments. But you should comment, by the way. It's YouTube, so comment.
Please.
Just yeah, please. All right, let's go to the next one on here, Dave. Who's your next player that you're buying?
I'm going to talk about Chase Brown, and this one probably feels pretty obvious to a lot of people. You're probably buying high rather than buying low after last week because we saw that he can be an RB2 now in this offense. Didn't score points, was kept out of the end zone, but season high in rushing yards, season high in scrimmage yards, season high in yards per carry. I think the major thing here, though, is that like it's not just like a numbers thing. I think there's kind of a psychological aspect to trying to buy Chase Brown here because so many people paid up for Chase Brown. Like he was a round two pick, and he has been, going into last week, there was a lot of talk that he was just the worst pick that you could have made in fantasy football. It
Hmm.
was terrible. Like he wasn't even returning an RB3 value, and you drafted this guy hoping that he'd be a top five guy. So I think people paid up for him. They expected this top five running back value. And this is the first sign of life that he's shown. And I think a lot of people are just saying, like, I just want to offload this guy. Like it has been a month and a half of pain rostering and starting Chase Brown. And a lot of people might see last week's game as kind of a fluke. The first game with Joe Flacco kind of took the Steelers, a soft defense, by surprise. And I think there's some people that might want to just be done with Chase Brown, drafted him and want to get him off their team. So I think that's why, like, even though you're probably buying higher than you would have been 2, 3 weeks ago, I think you could still get him for below what his rest of season value can be. I'm looking at this guy as a plug and play high end RB2 going forward now because the threat of a passing game with Joe Flacco is going to open up those lanes for Chase Brown. We saw he was just getting pummeled in the backfield because there was no threat of a passing game. And very similar to what we were just talking about with Derrick Henry, like they were just loading 8 guys in the box. There was nothing for him to do. So looking at Chase Brown right now, some guys that I'd be happy to trade away for him, Jalen Warren, who I think is a very good running back, but I think that Chase Brown just has a higher ceiling than Warren does. Both of these Seattle running backs, kind of a common theme here. Like I'm looking to move off of Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet where I can. Ramondre Stevenson coming off a big game. I would trade him away for Chase Brown. And then Jamison Williams and we can talk about some other wide receivers. But I'm looking at Chase Brown not to be the top five guy he was drafted to be, but still viewing him as a volume play high end RB2 going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mention Chase Brown because I have mentioned him so many times already that I feel like I kind of just needed to get off the bandwagon a little
Yeah.
bit, just let it happen. But he looked fresh, he looked better. The offense obviously looked very different. This is a different team with Joe Flacco. on there. That's my only fear, is that like the buy low window for any of these players has completely shut, right? Because like Joe Flacco looked good in a primetime game. This wasn't one of those that got lost in the Sunday shuffle and you're like, oh, okay, Chase Brown, like 12
Right.
fantasy points. Decent, but not great. This is one of those you're like, ooh, Bengals offense could be good. I'm just going to keep holding on to Chase Brown.
Did you
So
see
yeah, like I'm with you.
there was a really funny clip going around, Joe Flacco after the game? Did you see? I think I saw it on Instagram this morning, so I can't give credit to whoever did it, but it was a really funny moment where Joe Flacco was talking about his first practice with the Bengals, and he's like, "I'm 40 years old." He's like, "And I was like nervous, like I had butterflies throwing the ball to Jamar Chase out there." He's like, "In my
They're
first
so
throw, like
good, you don't want to let them down.
right." And he's like, in the first throw, he's like, he's running a skinny post. He's like, and he went a little bit deeper than flatter. He's like, so I threw the ball expecting him to break in a little bit more, and he went a little bit deeper on it. He's like, and I throw the ball, it comes up short. He's like, and in my head, I'm just like, oh no, this guy's gonna think I suck. It's just like so funny.
Don't
Joe
look
Flacco,
bad in front of the cool kids.
right? Like a 20-year vet, and he's like talking about getting butterflies, throwing the ball to
Super Bowl
Jamar Chase.
MVP.
Yes, yes. 'Cause I thought that was just like a very funny moment.
Yeah, man. Hearing him talk about like he's calling plays that he doesn't quite know in the
Right.
huddle. Like he's hearing them calling them. And he's just like, I don't even know what it is, but like we're gonna run it. We're gonna
I
see
think
how it
Chase is
goes.
down there somewhere.
Yeah, dude, I mentioned it like 2 weeks ago or whenever the first start was. Is that Flacco and Chase had this really good rhythm, this really good timing on these outbreaking routes towards the
Yep.
sideline. And then they kept spamming that over and over, and then just kept spamming slants. Like it did not matter what coverage the defense was in. It was slant season for Jamar Chase. He's the new slant boy of the NFL while Joe Flacco is there, and I'm here for it.
Did you see
100%.
Flacco's face on the drop that he had in the fourth quarter?
Yes, it was
It was
so good.
so funny. He's like, oh, like you weren't supposed to do that.
He
It was
he
so
he
good.
looked like a YouTube thumbnail. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, it was good,
100%.
good stuff. That was a fun game.
So we talked about some elite talent there. I want to talk about another guy who's an elite talent, but has been kind of forgotten throughout this season because of injuries, because he just hasn't been on the field. And it's Brock Bowers, who is a guy that I want to take the big swing on. We've been talking week after week about how bad the tight end landscape is. And then, like you mentioned yesterday, Dave, every time we get into the waiver wire, we're like, oh, this is finally the tight end. And some of them have panned out. For the most part, they're flashes in the pan, and it goes back to whatever. If I have any kind of opportunity to go out and get a guy like Brock Bowers, I want to make that swing right now because it can change my season. And I mentioned the expected fantasy points. Guess what? Brock Bowers, number 2 in net expected fantasy points versus actual fantasy points. Now, smaller sample size. I get the concerns with the Raiders, but this is why you go and buy him, because there are all these concerns, because there's the injury, because there's everything going on. Like the vibes around the Raiders are atrocious right now. But the good thing is this: Brock Bowers is not like your typical tight end. He's going to line up anywhere all over the field. He can line up at wide receiver. He's moving around in the backfield. He's doing whatever. So Michael Mayer being productive doesn't actually worry me. Instead, it makes me happy to see that Michael Mayer's out there scoring 16 fantasy points in a game where the Raiders offense was just terrible. And then now we've got the Jacoby Myers trade that does still seem destined to happen. He was asked about it yesterday, and he's just like, yep, I still want to be traded. Nope, I don't want to be here. He's like, but I do not control that. So you got the Raiders on a bye week. Like everything, all the stars have aligned for this price to be as low as possible. Missing time. The Raiders are bad. It's on the bye week. And the team that drafted him probably in the first or second round, depending on how that draft went. They have been desperate. They have been losing. This has been probably the most frustrating pick for them. It's about time they probably just want to move on.
Yeah, and I traded for Brock Bowers a couple of weeks ago. I was making some
We're probably
offers
late,
for him.
honestly.
Yeah, and I wish I'd waited a little bit longer because after like every game that I felt like he missed, like his value went down even further and further and further. But yeah, this is we know who Brock Bowers is. Like week 1, we saw it was like the very end of the game. He had that non-contact injury, and kind of like we all panicked. But I don't remember before that, he had 100 yards. 13 yards per target. Like he was the Brock Bowers of old. Like he was a hyper efficient guy pulling targets, making big plays. And then we saw when he was out there with that knee brace, like there was one play that sticks out to me specifically. That was like just such an easy Brock Bowers touchdown. And like all he had to do is jump up and get it, which he does regularly. And he just like couldn't jump. And it was like, oh, that's not Brock Bowers. Like there's no athleticism right there. Like he can't jump. Like he shouldn't even be on the field. And then of course was out for the next few weeks after that. So I think that resting up, he should come back from the bye looking different. The one little pause I have, and it's this voice in the back of my head because you always get this buyer's regret after making a trade for a big player. it's just Pete Carroll, that he's just a
Mhm.
dirty, dirty liar when it comes to injuries. Like Chris Carson was one of my like favorite running backs in NFL history. And like I remember having this guy all throughout the offseason, drafted him in all my best ball leagues because Pete Carroll was like, yeah, he's gonna be good. He's gonna be good. And I remember like one day Pete Carroll comes out and he's like, he's progressing great. We're hoping to have him on the field soon. 24 hours later, he retired from the NFL with that neck injury. So that's like, I think the one thing in the back of my head is like, I have been burned by Pete Carroll's blatant optimism for players who are like seriously injured. But most of what we've heard is that he should be back after the bye. And I hope that holds true.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at a report right now from Sean Zittel of the Vegas Sports Today publication. Uh, Brock Bowers looking closer to full strength as the Raiders return to practice following a loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. He's got a sleeve on his leg, but no brace. He's
Good.
out there running at what looks like full speed and moving around. So if he doesn't come back, against the Chiefs, oh no, I'm sorry, they just play the Chiefs. I'm sorry. If he doesn't come back in the following week after the bye,
I don't know the week 9 schedule. 1 week at a time.
yeah,
Whoever
right,
they're playing
exactly.
after this week.
Yeah, exactly. If he doesn't come back for that one, we're probably another week away. And the way I kind of look at it too
I
here
do
is
like
like,
no brace though. That's big. Like getting
yeah,
out of that brace and practicing without a brace, that's huge.
100%. It looks like they're non-contact because they're not wearing pads, just helmets and jerseys. But
Yeah.
that's also just how a lot of the season goes. Um, I will say this: like, I think there's something too to like Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, all these guys. Like, they're on the hot seat. Everyone's jobs are on the line with how this season is going. I don't know why you wouldn't want to have your best player back in the lineup as soon as possible. So I do have my hopes up. It is always risky, guys. Like, I'm not going to say it's not risky to trade for a player who is coming off an injury on a bad offense. The risk is there, but that's why I'm calling these the big swings. These are the ones that are going to make or break your fantasy season. And for the most part, we're kind of all at that point anyways. Like there's no moral victory for second place.
Would you say the Raiders were a good offense last year,
No.
Alfredo? Yeah, it didn't stop
Uh
Brock Bowers from hanging like 20 points per game in fantasy. Like
yeah,
they're going to be
exactly.
bad. Brock Bowers is good. Yeah, we're
Unicorn.
not overthinking this one.
Unicorn. All right. Last guy you are buying here in fantasy.
Copy and paste from last week. I'm just still going to say Stefon Diggs, and I'm sorry for people who watched last week's episode and are looking for fresh takes and fresh opinions, but Stefon Diggs still to me is one of the biggest buys in fantasy football. Fourth in yards per route run. He was third last week, but Rashee Rice came in here and just immediately topping the charts in targets per route run, as you can imagine. So fourth in targets per route run behind Rashee Rice, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Cooper Kupp. He's third in yards per route run behind Jackson Smith-Njigba and Puka Nacua. I mean, this guy has I said Cooper Kupp. I meant Puka Nacua. I don't know why I said Cooper Kupp there. Puka Nacua, he's fourth in targets per route run. So this guy on a per route run basis has been one of the best receivers in football. The issue, of course, is that he is 73rd in routes run. He just isn't getting that full snap share yet. And this is an older player on a new offense coming back from a knee injury towards ACL last year. This game in week 8 will be the first time that he's played a full year removed from the injury, which is typically what we look for when we're coming back from these ACL injuries. So I think there's a couple of reasons here that he's not getting a full snap share. One could be that he's just an older guy coming back from an injury. Two could be that he doesn't block at all, so they only use him in obvious passing down situations. And I think that's probably a little bit more likely. But either way, like we are seeing Drake May look like one of the best quarterbacks in football right now, and nobody has stepped up as the primary pass catcher. We've seen these boom games from Hunter Henry and Kayshon Boutte and Demario Douglas, but I think if one guy is going to establish himself as that go-to weapon, it's going to be Stefon Diggs, the same way that he did for Josh Allen early in his career. So again, looking to trade for him where I can. Jamison Williams is going to be a common theme of guys that I'm trying to trade away on today's show. I would trade Jamison Williams away. I'd trade away Matthew Golden, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin. Those are all guys that I would be happy to move if I'm getting Stefon Diggs in return.
Yeah, I just like we said last week, I want pieces of this New England Patriots offense. And I do think Diggs ends up being the guy that probably has the best floor for targets here. And there is some like I do think that he fits in nicely as a wide receiver 3 weekly for you. And there have been guys like a lot of the names you mentioned, DJ Moore, Jamison Williams, that have been giving you wide receiver 3 or worse production on a weekly basis, but they have the wide receiver 2 name. And
Right.
that's the thing is like you could trade a name that's a wide receiver 2 giving you wide receiver 4 production and get a wide receiver 3 like Stefon Diggs in return.
Stefon
And
Diggs,
I'm down with
he's
that.
a name too, but I think he's
Not
like
anymore.
a dusty wide receiver 3 name is what people think when they think
Right.
of Stefon Diggs, when the reality is when he's on the field, when he's running routes, he's still performing like an elite wide receiver 1. It's just that he's not a full-time player right now. Maybe that changes, maybe it doesn't, but like at worst, you're trading for Stefon Diggs, who is a wide receiver 3 right now. At best, you're getting a guy who at the end of the season could heat up, far removed from that ACL tear and return wide receiver 1 value.
Yeah, I think when we say like a name, there have been so many times where fantasy managers are burned by a DeAndre Hopkins late in the career, a Tyler Lockett late in the career. A lot of these guys that have been good for so long and then they're just gone. But for every one of those, there's a Keenan Allen, there's a
Right.
Stephon Diggs, there's a
Right.
Devontae Adams, there's these guys that hang on for a long time. I'm gonna give you my last player to buy, and it's funny that you mentioned being willing to sell DJ Moore because my player to buy is going to be Rome Odunze here,
Yeah.
who I still see him. Listen, he is the number one wide receiver in this offense who we are going to be suffering from a little bit of recency bias here, Dave. He was a victim of a bad penalty on a would-be touchdown 2 weeks ago. He was then a victim of bad game script for the Bears last week, where they get up 20-0 in the first half. You're obviously not going to try to keep passing as much, especially if you're having success running the ball. So this is 2 games back to back where it's just happenstance, where we're not seeing the same Rome Odunze we did throughout the earlier parts of the season. I think a lot of people are going to point to it and say the touchdowns aren't there anymore. That's what's going away. We're getting the regression to the mean. Could have had a touchdown 2 weeks ago. We
Hmm.
don't know what could have happened in last week's game with a different game script. And I'm not saying we need to plan for touchdowns every week, but when you have a guy who is the number one wide receiver on a team that the offense has actually been flourishing at times, I'm going to take that because you have the ability, the chance for a touchdown every single week, and that's on top of the target volume that he's receiving. You've got Cole Kmet injured; he's still the team's leading target earner, and he's got one of the easiest schedules over the next 5 weeks for a fantasy wide receiver. I think Rome Odunze is a nice buy low in this window here.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. Would you rather have AJ Brown or Rome Odunze rest of the season? That was one where I really, really struggled doing my rest of season
Whew.
rankings this week.
Whew, that's a tough one, man.
Yeah,
I'm gonna end up having one directly above the other in a
right,
ranking, and it's gonna flip flop by next week. So like
right.
that's
That
probably
was a
one of
tough
those.
one.
If I got offered that, like I would just stand pat. We're good
Yeah.
here. No trade needed.
But I think like there to me when I'm looking at rest of season value, it does feel like there's like a pretty big fall off once you get outside of the top 12 and inside like the end of the
Mhm.
top 12 for me, Devontae Adams, Rashi Rice, AJ Brown, Rome Odunze, Nico Collins. After that, then I look at Tedero McMillan, Emeka Ibuka, George Pickens, Xavier Worthy, Jalen Waddle. Like those are all guys that like it does feel like there's a very clear bunch of
Oh
wide
my
receiver
God,
ones.
trade Jalen Waddle right now. I didn't
Yeah,
even
and
put. I don't. We didn't put him as our sell. Trade him now. There you
yeah.
go. Nine
So
players for this
So
episode.
those are all guys though that I think like there's a big enough gap that even though they're like 1, 2, 3 spots behind Rome Odunze, when I'm looking at Tedero McMillan, Emeka Ibuka, George Pickens, Xavier Worthy, Jalen Waddle, I would package any of those guys up with like a low end starter. And I can't think
Yeah.
of a name off the top of my head or like, an injury away back, somebody that has some sort of value. If you can trade one of those guys plus another player and get a Rome Odunze in return, I feel like you're getting a guy who's a plug and play wide receiver 1. And like, had he not had that ticky tack penalty calling back a touchdown a couple of weeks ago, Robin Dunze would be like a top 3 fantasy wide receiver right now, and everyone would be over their skis. But just a weird game script last week, a touchdown called back on a penalty the week before, and people are forgetting how awesome this guy was before the bye. I'm completely with you. Roman Dunze is a great buy.
I got one for you if you want to sell for an injury away back that you can pair with somebody. Because I'm
Travion
going with Zach
Henderson.
Charbonnet. Oh no,
Oh
that's
yeah,
a nice one. That's a
yeah,
nice one.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the Travion Henderson, like that train has left the station. It's
Mhm.
gone beyond the Dennis meme. Like it cannot go lower. Like it's just nobody wants it.
Which I will
I
say at this point, I'm almost willing to buy Travion Henderson just
Me too.
because everybody's panicking. Like you
Because
could
we're
probably get him
sickos.
for nothing. Yeah, I mean, like
Yeah.
everybody, like we saw Terrell Jennings come in and out touch him last week, and I don't know what was going on, but like I think we are at the point that everybody is overcorrected. Like I'm seeing Travion Henderson getting dropped in leagues through
Yeah.
like last night's waivers. Like, yeah, I think we've probably overcorrected with Travion Henderson to the point that like I'll buy him if nobody else is.
I sent Bam Knight to the manager in my league. That's Trevion Henderson. And I have not heard back yet. I'll let you know what happens
I
with
mean,
Bam
yeah, if
Knight.
you can pull that off, I mean, yeah, that,
That's
that that probably means Henderson's one of the biggest buys in fantasy if that's what people are
yeah.
selling him for.
It's magic. It's magic. Look at that. We're 10 players. Keep over delivering on everything
That's
that we're
what we
doing
do.
here.
Yeah.
That's what we do. So yeah, I'm going to Zach Charbonnet here as a guy that I just want to sell. I just want off the roller coaster. Like I want off the ride. It seemed fun where you're like, okay, he's an injury away back, high contingent upside. But that's not happening, and a lot of it is because of this plan that the Seahawks staff had talked about in the preseason is like, we want to keep everyone healthy. Now listen, injuries can happen at any point, right? The Zach Charbonnet thing is like you're going into each week and you don't want to start him because you don't know how many touches he's going to get. You don't know how good or bad the Seahawks offense is going to be. You can't even predict when he's going off. He gets the 2 touchdowns in this last game after being horribly inefficient for 4 straight games in a row where he was unstartable. And this is against the Houston Texans defense that is actually really good against running backs. And it was just a very weird game script. Seahawks get up early. They just run the clock out with their running backs. So this is another one where I want to cash in on the 2 touchdown game on the touches. This kind of stinks that the running backs are stuck in a 50-50 split. I just, in every single word here, I just want off the ride. I want off the Zach Charbonnet ride. I get the contingent upside, but for me, the value is that he is a bench player. For someone else, they might see him as a starter, as an RB2 because of these touchdowns. And that's the thing is if I can go and I can get one of the players we've mentioned earlier for Zach Charbonnet, I'm in on that.
So I'll disagree with you a little bit on this one,
That's
Alfredo,
fine.
and I'm
I
sorry.
know you
I
like
like
Charbonnet.
I like when we agree, and I think sometimes the disagree, it just opens up a good conversation here. I still think Charbonnet is a really good player, and we got to
I
remember
didn't
that.
say he's a bad player, but he's been a very inefficient player.
So he was knocked out early in week 2 with a foot injury. And I think I mean, like, I'm willing to look at his entire body of work, like what he did through his first 2 years in the league, more than what he's done over the last few weeks. So many people are quick to point to the yards per attempt as, like, the big knock against him. But he averaged 4 yards per attempt in week 1, and then he got injured, and it's been down since. And then it rebounded last week to 4.1 yards per attempt, the highest of the season. So I do think that a lot of his deficiencies that we've seen through the last month or so are just him coming back from that foot injury. I think he's a good running back, and I have been preaching the gospel about Zach Charbonnet for
I know
years. Like,
you
I am
have.
just
I
such a
know you
fan of this
have.
guy.
You're so
Size is just as
indoctrinated at this point. I knew this was coming too. I was going to be more shocked if you said I agree, and we
yeah.
moved on.
Yeah,
I
and
knew this
and
was
and
coming.
really, I'm chalking it up as injuries, and like maybe I'm a fool for doing that, but like this guy he came back from an injury and he was not efficient. But what we've seen are 2 years of good efficiency leading up to this, so they clearly like him, and that was a surprise to me. I mean, everything we heard, like my pre-draft stance was like get Ken Walker because Clint Kubiak was just gushing about him. I didn't expect to see this 50-50 split, but I think that it makes sense and it's working for them. Like the Seahawks are 5-2 right now. I think having Ken Walker kind of being that home run guy, Zach Charbonnet being the short down and distance guy, the guy who can come in at the goal line, I think it is a very good symbiotic relationship between the two of them. So I'll push back a little bit. I think that a lot of
I
people are
just
going to
don't
try to
want it.
sell high off of that 2 touchdown game, and if people are selling, I'll buy.
I just don't want it. Like I don't want a touchdown dependent running back 3 that I never going to know when to start on an offense that they have their good weeks, but they're not a consistently high scoring offense. They're winning, 20 to 17 games every week. This is not a team that's going out and consistently putting up, 30 plus points. So
Right.
I just yeah, it's just gonna be you and me would be a perfect trade partner in this scenario. Like I want off the Zach Charbonnet train. For that matter, I want off the Ken Walker train as well. Like I'm just saying, it's just the value there is probably worse because he didn't have a 2 touchdown game and the expectations were so much higher.
And I'm buying Ken Walker too. I think that like I
Of
just
course
got
you
Ken
are, you
Walker.
sicko.
I got Ken Walker in a guillotine league this morning. Like he was chopped, and you get the $1,000 budget that you could spend over the entire
Congrats,
year.
you're getting chopped next week.
And the thing, I don't even need to start him. Like I'm flush with running backs right now. I got Jonathan Taylor and Rashad White, but and it was one of those like I threw in a low bid thinking that I wouldn't even get him. Out of $1,000 budget, I put $71 on Zach Charbonnet and I got him. The next closest bid was $2. And this is an active league. I think everybody is just like wants so like nothing to do with Kenneth Walker. And I think that we have overcorrected. And this is a sharp league too. Like this is a lot of like fantasy football experts and like, everybody was putting bids in and on all the other places, but Ken Walker was just completely overlooked in this league. And I feel like a fool for bidding $71 on him when I could have got him for 3. But it's just kind of crazy to me how like everybody has just completely written off Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet on what's one of the best run games in the NFL right now. It just, to me, like there's still contingent upside with either of these guys. If Charbonnet goes down, Walker's a league winner. If Walker goes down, Charbonnet's a
That's it.
league winner. And you might
But
not
that's
feel great
it.
about starting them on a weekly basis, but there's still elite contingent upside.
Yeah, but that's it. Like it's so it's like you're almost talking about these guys like they are really hot commodities. To me, this is now they're both in Tyler Algier territory.
Yeah.
Really high contingent upside. Like that's not sexy for me. That's not swinging my team right now. That does fill up my bench nicely and it makes me feel good about insurance policies, but that's not where I drafted Ken Walker. That's not what I wanted out of Zach Charbonnet. I either wanted to like keep him on my bench or no, I can start him because Walker is out. That's the thing is like both these guys become equally as ineffective for my fantasy team because if you start them, you're getting 8 points. If you bench them, you're getting 8 points. There's just like there's nothing there unless one of them gets hurt. So for me, like the value is it's all contingent upside, like you said. I just have enough of those guys. I have
Yeah.
enough of them, which is why like I'm willing to. And of course, maybe you can't have enough, right? Like you can do a whole bench full of
And
contingent
I do.
upside running backs.
I've got him a few ticks ahead of Algier because Algier is like completely game script dependent. Like there's only
Sure.
some games where they have the lead. Where yeah, like it doesn't feel great like putting them in your lineup, but especially now, like we're in the heat of bye weeks, where like bye weeks are just terrible for the next month of the season. That Zach Charbonnet, Ken Walker, you might be able to do better in your flex, but there's still flex worthy guys as injuries and buys are hitting us. And there's the elite contingent upside. There just aren't a lot of running backs that you're getting that from. So I don't know. Maybe I'm a sucker, but I like this Kubiak offense. I like the talent level with both of these guys. So I'm still buying Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet. And again, maybe I'm just a sucker, but that's where I'm at.
Both things can be true. People can be willing to buy them, and you can still be a sucker.
Yep. Yep.
I'm trying to look up something. I was going to ask you. No, never mind. He's awful. All right, let's go to the last. I was curious about Woody Marks right now. That's not going well. Let's go to the last player that you are looking to sell right now, Dave.
Brian Thomas Jr. And
What's a
I
sell
know
low?
this is a sell low. It is. And
Okay.
maybe this isn't what I should be doing, but I'm starting to get very, very worried here. And again, like I try so often, and I know like every time we do this show, this trade show, everybody in the YouTube comments hates me on this episode because I don't try to do what everybody else is doing. Like when everybody's saying buy a player, I'm trying to sell that player and vice versa because I feel like everybody has the same information. And I feel like you gain your edges from doing the opposites. So many people are just pointing to the target total and last year's production with Brian Thomas Jr. and saying that it makes for a good buy low. And logically, I get it. Like there is reason to buy Brian Thomas Jr. I'm getting worried though. And like last year, we know the story from last year. So much of his production came late in garbage time, late in the season when the year was over for the Jaguars and Mac
Mac
Jones was
Jones.
starting. Exactly. And like we seen like Mac Jones, like he just did this with Kendrick Bourne. Like he got Kendrick Bourne to back 150-yard games. Like he's willing to just rip the ball downfield, and it doesn't make for good football, but it makes for fun fantasy football production. And I've talked about it so much this season, but Liam Cohen is just asking Brian Thomas Jr. to play in a role that he is not fit for. He's not a guy who can run these traffic heavy routes across the middle of the field. And now we see the Travis Hunter breakout. And this isn't just like a fluke. Like it wasn't one big play from Travis Hunter. He pulled 14 targets last week. Ryan Heath pointed this out, but he has ran more routes over the last 2 weeks than any wide receiver in football. So like Travis Hunter is now a full-time wide receiver. And I said it a couple of weeks ago that I think Travis Hunter is just simply a better wide receiver than Brian Thomas Jr., much to the dismay of YouTube commenters. And I'm sure they'll let me hear it again here. But I'm starting to worry that Brian Thomas Jr. isn't the wide receiver one that a lot of people hoped he'd be. And I know, like, you drafted him at the end of the first round. We saw the production and the rookie year breakout, but I'm starting to get the feeling that he's kind of like a fancy Jameson Williams, Alec Pierce type of player where he can run that 9 route and he can have those big boom games, but he isn't a guy who has this fully developed route tree that can do it all. So I'm not trying to sell super low. Like, I'm not saying that you need to get Brian Thomas Jr. off of your team, but I put together a list of a few players that I would happily trade Brian Thomas Jr. away for. Let me know what you think of this list here, Alfredo. Quentin
Okay.
Johnston, Zay Flowers, DK
Sure.
Metcalf, Garrett
Sure.
Wilson, who's injured right now, but we know he's got top 10 upside when he's back. Travis
I like
Etienne,
Garrett.
who is coming off of a handful of bad games. DeAndre Swift in an improved Bears run defense. Those are all players that I would trade Brian Thomas Jr. away for right now. I don't think you're selling like super low, but I think you can get a high end wide receiver two or a high end RB2 in return. And I don't know if Brian Thomas Jr. is going to do that this year.
every single one of those players you just listed made me go, eh.
Yeah.
Brian Thomas included. Like I just
Yeah.
didn't feel great about any of them. And
Zay Flowers,
maybe that's the
you wanna
thing.
feel good about getting Zay
Zay
Flowers?
Flowers. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Zay Flowers. Yeah. That one's different. I think that's the one. If I can do Brian Thomas for Zay Flowers straight up, I'm doing that 100%.
And I think the DK Metcalf, I think that is like,
Mm.
you want to talk about a comp, like a player comp. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is a very similar player to DK Metcalf, just with a little bit less speed and athleticism and size. But like they do very similar things. Like we wish casted for years that DK Metcalf would become this well-rounded, versatile receiver, and it just never really happened. Like DK Metcalf is who he is, a guy who has great straight line speed, who can make contested catches downfield, and that's what Brian Thomas Jr. can do as well. So when I'm looking at the two, DK Metcalf doesn't have a wide receiver two in Pittsburgh. I also have more faith in Aaron Rodgers right now than I do in Trevor Lawrence. So if we're looking at basically DK Metcalf on a worse offense with stiffer target competition, that's kind of what I'm seeing in Brian Thomas Jr. right now.
Yeah, I think that's the thing you said there is the faith in Trevor Lawrence. I think that's all gone. I think that's gone from so many people. I think the Jaguars need to be thinking about that too at this point. Like,
Yeah.
what kind of faith do you have in this quarterback? It's
We can
I
think about it, but they're tied to a hefty contract, so
I
they can
know,
think
I
about it all they want, but
know.
they're stuck with it.
I know, same way, yeah. Well,
Same with the
Dolphins are stuck
Dolphins,
with it
yeah.
too. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, now it's the end of the show, and I've gotten sad. So this is going to be the part where we wrap it up, and Dave and I will be back again tomorrow, giving you our tiers and rankings for Week 8, the running backs and wide receivers. As always, I want to thank everybody for watching or listening all the way through. If you are on YouTube, please take a moment to like this video, comment down below with your questions, your thoughts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, take a moment to leave a 5-star review. It means the absolute world to us. For myself, for Dave, I want to thank you all. We'll see you next time. Adios.